Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ted Rozier. I am the Director of Engineering for Festo Didactic in North America. This evening, we'd like to welcome you all to a panel discussion entitled Industry 4.0 Manufacturing Maturity Model. Before we take a deep dive into such an engaging topic, for not only industry, but also educators, I'd like to set the stage and expectations for the audience with just a few intriguing questions that will be answered today. The first question, what advances in manufacturing capabilities are required to achieve in 3 to 5 year strategic goals? Number two, what is an appropriate role for digital technology in the big picture? Number three, where are people process technology capabilities in balance or out of balance? How are company operations preparing for anticipated disruptions? And last but not least, what are the top priorities for smart manufacturing? I would like to turn your attention to two of the panelists that will be answering these questions. First, we have Doug Berger, who is a serial entrepreneur, founder of two consulting firms, COO of a technology startup, an adjunct faculty of entrepreneur boot camps, and author and keynote speaker. We also have Jim Weitzel. Jim's career has centered around innovation and improving things. He's known as a visionary in smart manufacturing and was one of the early champions nationally. Jim spent most of his career at General Mills and retired as director of engineering. He was responsible for improving the existing asset base in GMI manufacturing across the globe. Jim was chairman of the board of the Smart Manufacturing Leadership Coalition. At this time, we'll now turn our attention to Doug Berger.
Thanks, Ted. I'm just setting up here. Terrific. So we're going to, first I want to thank those members or participants of IoT Industry World who completed the assessment and contributed your time and your thoughtfulness. And thanks to IIoT World for sponsoring this. And at the end of our session, we'll let other people know how you can contribute your views to the overall assessment. The spirit of the assessment is really to provoke new insights and to provoke them along the areas that Ted just spoke about. And, over the past year and a half, we have crowdsourced hundreds of people in both multi-company benchmark and individual company benchmarks on this assessment. And we started the assessment with a frame of reference called, what are your 3 to 5 year manufacturing and supply chain goals? And so we're framing capability maturity in the context of strategic competitiveness and framing it in the context of adapting to the changing business environment. And so we're out to uncover step change opportunities from for a company's investment roadmap. So we want to in creating the assessment, we walked in the shoes of a plant general manager, or we walked in the shoes of VP of manufacturing and supply chain. And walking in their shoes, they have a holistic view, not a technology-centric view. So we asked questions in the assessment about gap to goals, because achieving performance both in the day-to-day, week-to-week, and performance over the longer term is the critical motivation of executives to invest in new capabilities. And then we wanted to understand the linkage between those business goals and capabilities, those capabilities on hand today and those capabilities that are needed in the future. And what are the magnitude of the gaps? Are we dealing with small gaps? Are we dealing with big gaps, gaps in achieving goals and gaps in the needed capabilities? Also, Jim and I got very interested in disruption. And we got interested in disruption again more than a year and a half ago. And when we initially started doing assessments, asking questions around disruption, people said, gee, why are you asking questions around disruption? And I guess you could say we're a little bit ahead of our time. So we'll be covering the imbalance among capabilities. We'll be covering priority areas, and we'll be looking for insights that are available from listening to outlier perspectives. So from your point of view, the point of view of a manufacturer or the point of view of a vendor working to assist the manufacturer, starting with an assessment, all right, then what the assessment's going to highlight is the assessment's going to highlight areas of misalignment. And so the next phase, as you think about road mapping, is to bring people into alignment on the current state and needed future state, identifying high impact targets, and then going after developing in a kind of rapid, iterative way, developing the capabilities to actually deliver on your high impact targets. So we did an assessment in conjunction with IIoT World. You can see we had a good cross-section of job functions represented, a good cross-section of organizations, regions, company sizes. And when you break down the industries, about half our respondents came from manufacturing companies, and about half our respondents came from vendors to manufacturing organizations. And we asked then three fundamental questions. How are we doing? How are we really doing? And how are we doing in the frame of reference of how is the business doing and how are the capabilities we have doing in delivering the goals the business needs? Then where do we need to be? What are our gaps? And what are we going to do about getting there? So with that in mind, we were curious about a number of things. The first thing we were curious about is building the business case, because we've heard from a lot of people and a lot of other research that building the business case is one of the big challenges. So we wanted to look into building the business case. So we identified 7 fundamental goals that every manufacturing organization has to deal with. And we started first by asking, in the day-to-day, what's the importance of those goals? And you can see they fall into 3 clusters. No surprise, the highest cluster is safety and quality. The second cluster is really about on-time delivery, cost, and asset utilization, so the operating performance area. And the third cluster is really dealing with things that have really moved into a higher share of mind: supply chain resilience and agility, and sustainability. So the first questions we were asking is, what's your confidence in achieving your goals? And for the most part, the average response was, we expect to meet our goals. We expect to meet all of these goals. But then we started to use the assessment data model to do some filtering and slicing to look for outliers and what outliers might tell us about this. And so an interesting insight is the story that outliers tell us. So outliers tell us that while safety and quality are the only goals that people think have a chance of significantly exceeding, the remaining goals, 20% of respondents expect to fall short. So this is where, while the average says we expect to meet, 20% of respondents are saying we expect to fall short. Now, what's our approach to closing those gaps? So given that most people expect to meet or exceed, no surprise that the approach is pretty conventional around continuing current practices, continuing leadership, and making continuous improvement. Interestingly, though, only 15 to 20% of respondents said that they plan to scale technology. And both manufacturers and vendors see little need for new or emerging capabilities. So somewhat interesting and insightful is, in order to achieve the expected goals that companies have today, they see little need for new or emerging capabilities and little need to massively scale their investment in processes and technologies. Then we were looking into disruption. So a way of thinking about disruption, most of you have probably heard the term VUCA, that stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. And we originally set out to say, you know, the times are changing. But in fact, the more we looked at it, really the times have changed. And you can't pick up a newspaper today without hearing about the real challenges, for example, in supply chain. And so we really got curious about how disruption is really being factored into a company's capability strategy. So in that regard, the first thing that we looked at was the impact. So we identified 8 typical disruptions. You can see they're up there, anywhere from on the right-hand side where it says disruptive technologies, to supply chain disruption, new business models, geopolitical events and trends, and that would include tariffs and other trade barriers, new technologies, regulatory and tax changes, you know, new entrant, and retirement of the baby boomers and acquisition of talent. And you can see that in some of the disruptions were expected to have a spotty impact, like new entrant. Some disruptions were expected to broadly stretch manufacturing. Some would be expected to force significant change, like supply chain disruption. Some would be a game changer. And the one that kind of surprised us was the widely varying views around retirement and talent availability, given at least that in the United States, something like 30% of the manufacturing workforce is going to retire in the next 3 to 5 years. And we hear constantly about the shortage of attracting new talent into manufacturing. So we were actually surprised by the widely varying views. We thought the views would tend much more towards broadly stretch or force significant change overall. And then when it came to preparedness, you can see that we set a spectrum of how companies might prepare for disruptions, anywhere from being unaware or dismissing the disruption, all the way up to thinking of themselves as being ahead of the game. And what struck us as interesting when it came to disruptions were, and those are the things we highlighted in red, is the gap between the expected impact and the level of preparedness. So geopolitical trends and events are expected to force significant change, yet when you looked at the level of preparedness, the level of preparedness was, we're discussing it. When you look at disruptive technologies that people expect to be a game change, you know, people are just exploring it. They haven't even started to place small bets. And on the other hand, new entrant competition, which is only expected to have spotty impact, that's an area where people are driving quite extensive changes and plans and changes. So that's some of the insights from looking at the gaps to goals and the capabilities for closing the gaps, and looking at the impact and preparedness around disruption. And so I'm going to now hand the presentation over to my colleague, Jim, who's going to talk more about the particular manufacturing maturity capabilities.
Thanks, Doug. What I'm going to really jump into now is the actual maturity model itself. And so let's take a look at what that told us. Did that screen advance okay? I'm going to do it here. There we go. Okay, so when you take a look at the maturity matrix, the maturity matrix that we came up with is 6 dimensions. It starts with operations, automation and control, information processing, continuous improvement methods, digital transformation, and workforce development. And what you can see is that the manufacturers today in their current state are really at a basic level. You can see this histogram where basically everyone's in this 2 or 3 zone across the screen, with the exception for the people side. And we've seen this time and time again that the people side is less mature than automation and control or continuous improvement. So you'll see the people side is much more around a 1 kind of level. So that was an interesting takeaway. Second thing is that kind of a takeaway from taking a look at this is that most manufacturers really can't support advanced capabilities at this point. So when you take a look at this, when we look at the data and it says that people are just starting, over roughly half the responses are working on building their foundation and are not ready to advance. At the same time, the 80-20 rule still applies. And there are quite a few examples, 10 to 15 to 18% of people that are early adopters. And those are the people that are, the admired organizations, the ones that are telling the stories about IoT, Industry 4.0, smart manufacturing, and really vaunting their successes. So it gives everyone a reason to believe. If you take a look at the future state, so if people are just starting, where do people think they're going to be in 3 to 5 years? And the answer is quite further down the pipe, right? So they're gonna move from the 1, 2, 3 kind of space to the 4, 5, 6 space. And obviously, this is an aggregate. This is not mapping any one particular company, but people see a lot of improvement. And how are they going to move up? What we see when you actually look at the data, over half the people that were in the 1, 2 zone are moving towards the top tier. And we clearly saw that we had a 50% reduction in the people that were in that foundational zone, and we had a 2x of people that were in the top tier. So no surprise to anyone that movement is happening. And that's a great thing. The other topics that we started looking at was, well, how ready is the organization to actually take on some of these challenges? And here's the good news. The good news is that, as far as the goal setting and the alignment within the organization, that was all very positive. People felt that they had relatively solid data, that roughly 60% sufficiency, that their data was good enough to do some of these more advanced things. They felt that their access to expertise and resources was quite well, but they had pain points. And the pain points were they didn't have a good understanding of the competition and what the best practices and the best capabilities were there. They didn't think they had adequate funding. And then the last two, the ability to collaborate with others inside and outside your organization, and then take on new capabilities within your organization. So it was not unusual for organizations to follow a motto of build it and they will come, and then nobody came because they didn't want to change. So there's a whole change management topic there. And I'm zipping through this pretty fast because we only have 7 minutes left. And then the next topic was around key priorities. And we asked the people in the survey, and we said, okay, if here's 10 things that you could invest in to improve your smart manufacturing, your Industry 4.0 capabilities, pick 3. And there was and so we ended up having some ties. So we actually, we picked the top 4, and the top 4 were really thematic around connectivity, availability, and sharing. This concept that I've got to get data, I've got to use it in a predictive and prescriptive way. I need to have real-time connectivity inside and outside my factory. And so that was very aligning. And then the thing that was kind of surprising is that we asked about the willingness or lack of willingness to connect your supply chain and connect with others. And a little bit of a surprise there was 74% of the respondents, and we said that understood the organizations because there were some NAs or don't knows. 74% of the respondents were willing to share the data in a connected supply chain. So, you hear quite often that companies aren't willing to share their data. There was a very, very strong willingness to share their data, and over half the respondents were actually starting to do that or well on their way. A little bit of a surprising data compared to what you might hear. But at the end, when we take a look at kind of where people are going, and it was clear, and especially in that maturity matrix, that what got us here will not get us there. And this digital promise in this early stage that we're in is still really unfulfilled. And you take a look at it and you ask yourself why. And what you see is that the execution, the actual project work that you're doing, is not flowing from vision and strategy. And so people don't have this compelling vision and strategy that they're rallying around. You see plants and enterprises, the initiatives that they're doing are fragmented and disconnected. And you're seeing technology marching to a different beat that doesn't seem quite in sync with closing the gaps and the advancing culture of the organization. And those are just the kind of the tip of the iceberg things that we saw. But we said, stand back and reimagine what world-class manufacturing supply chain would look like in 2025 and 2030. And those negatives, those disconnects would go away. Execution is flowing. Plant and enterprise initiatives are not fragmented and disconnected. Technology is in sync with closing performance gaps and advancing the culture. And when you start to see that, you start really seeing that the advancements, the maturity, the capabilities really get delivered. And what we were trying to do here in this assessment was really kind of showcase the beginning part of the model of how you get unstuck in your organization, how you would go and basically do an assessment. But then, and that's what we did here, was this very first part, but we didn't do the next 3, is where you get alignment and you try to shift the mindset around this digital focus. You go and take on these high impact target areas, and then you literally go through and get breakthrough capability against that. And you do it, and you do it, and you do it again. And we're right close to time. So the housekeeping on this session is to encourage the folks that are attending and the people that will be listening to this session later to take the survey. It takes about 15 minutes. I see that it's now, the link to this survey is posted in the chat session. And you can go online and take it and add your data into this survey. The second place you can go is actually back on the IIoT website, and there's a link to the survey on there. All participants who completed the survey will get sent this complete assessment report with all the data. We just did a high level run by because we only had 20 minutes or so to kind of tick through this. And then, since we are running short on the day, and this is the end of the day, what IIoT World has done is graciously set up this new capability called Clubhouse, where we're going to go into Q&A and answer any questions that you might have around data in the survey. What insights might be happening? Do you agree with it? Is this correct? Does this surprise you in any way? And then also we offer up that if you want to do a deeper dive, you can ping Doug or I, and we can certainly go further. And with that, I'm going to close it out and hand it over to Ted or Lucian or anyone that wants to give more information about the next steps. This is the Clubhouse for networking that starts in a minute or two. And we will go over there to have discussions. And I think a number of you probably already have gotten invites to go to Clubhouse. And I will end it there. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Doug and Ted, and for you for sticking around so late. So again, we're still in this lockdown, no face-to-face events. So Clubhouse seems to offer the water cooler interaction, or if it's the happy hour. There are 3 rooms available, thanks to the partnership with the Industry 4.0 Club. They set up a site. So if you go on the agenda on this particular, on this particular session on the Clubhouse for networking, you can see ways to get an invite to the Clubhouse. In the section that Jim has just talked about in the manufacturing metrics, you also find a link to the survey. Dr. Rudinsky has posted the survey in the chat. So with that, I appreciate everybody's time. Good morning, whatever time you're at, good evening. So next couple hours, like I said, there are 3 rooms available. One of them is kind of like takeaways from today. Another one is on women in technology and manufacturing. And another one is around the manufacturing happy hour, which is organized by one of the gentlemen that runs a podcast. So very much appreciate it and look forward to talk to you in a Clubhouse in a couple hours. By the way, the questions that were posted in the Q&A, we will take them off either via the social channels if they are for a blog post. If not, we will basically reach out directly and answer those questions if we don't get to answer them in a Clubhouse. So with that, thank you so much. This concludes the program for today. Appreciate for making this successful program.